Hey everyone! Well, as you're probably aware, Samsung has had a pretty significant data breach, with nearly 200 gigabytes of source code being made public or involuntarily open sourced. Now, this attack was done again by the Lapsus group, which is specifically known as a ransomware group who targeted NVIDIA recently. Now, the NVIDIA breach was actually a lot smaller, but contained some pretty significant information. We know that a lot of employees' email addresses were leaked, including some password hashes that have been reverse engineered. And we also know that some security certificates have been signed using NVIDIA's keys, which will allow malware to be installed onto Windows devices. So we know that there has been some significant security implications because of this NVIDIA breach. So what about Samsung? Are we going to see the same type of information in the Samsung leak? Well, today we're going to run through exactly what was leaked. We're going to take a dive into it, and we're going to find out if any secrets have been exposed because of the Samsung breach and what that could mean. So first, let's take a look at what exactly was leaked. Well, the attackers leaked files in 3 parts. Now, part 1 was really a dump of some of Samsung's security applications, so Samsung Knox, their security defense, and their bootloaders. Now, this could be really significant for researchers or malicious actors to find vulnerabilities within their source code. And I know that there's a lot of chatter about the bootloader being exposed because Samsung is notoriously hard to root their phones. And so people that want to have that option of having that extra freedom in their own devices haven't really been able to do so. But now that the bootloader has been leaked, well, it's possible that people will be able to find more ways to be able to do this. The second part really contains information about Samsung's encryption, and in particular, a lot of information about the biometrics that they're using, the fingerprint scanners, the facial recognition. Now again, if this contains significant vulnerabilities, there is potential for researchers, malicious actors to be able to go in and uncover vulnerabilities and how these works. And the last file contained a whole bunch of Git repositories, a huge amount of Git repositories. And this here is really where I've focused a lot of the analysis to see what kind of immediate information we can gather. Now, Samsung said that as a result of the breach, that no personal information or users' information have been exposed. And while this is true fundamentally, well, I can tell you that a lot of sensitive information has been exposed, which could potentially lead to further breaches. As we did with the Twitch breach, we decided to scan the Samsung source code for sensitive information like secrets, and we found an awful lot. We found roughly 6,700 keys after filtering what we believe to be high-value candidates. Now, this may seem like a huge amount of keys, and don't get me wrong, it is. But this is fairly typical of what we would see in a breach this size. In fact, we found 6,600 keys in a very similar sized breach when we analyzed the Twitch's source code. The fact that these numbers are so close together is just a little bit of a coincidence, I must say, not necessarily a rule of thumb. Now, we can actually analyze and look at the types of keys that we found. And what is not so surprising is that in this breach, we found a huge amount of internal system keys, so private keys, RSA keys. Now, these keys can be hugely sensitive. For example, the Samsung signing keys could be in here, which just like NVIDIA could allow malicious actors to really sign malicious pieces of software saying that they are safe. But these keys can also give access to internal systems that are quite closed down or very limited in the access. So it's hard to know with so many keys exactly what ones hugely sensitive and attackers can use and which ones potentially aren't. What is interesting is the other 10% of keys that we have here. Now, usually we would see more keys that are associated to external services, but it makes sense in what Samsung is developing that you wouldn't have so many of these services. But in saying that, we still find a large number. For instance, we found 80 AWS keys. And we can take a look at some of these keys. For example, this one here is found in an application.yaml file. This is a file that is used to really kind of set up infrastructure, so it isn't uncommon to find keys in here. And here we have, although we've removed the keys so that you can't use them, but here we have an AWS key. Now, this is exactly the type of file that we would expect to find active AWS keys within. Now, I'm not going to go and check this service and see what it's used for because that's crossing a line, but a malicious actor wouldn't have so much barriers to entry and potentially could be causing a lot of headaches at Samsung right now. Now, we also found keys to GitHub repositories, and these are particularly interesting because here we have an address, a GitHub address for Samsung that's publicly accessible, so I can view it right now. And then we also have the credentials to be able to access this, client ID and the client secret. So it is potential that attackers or malicious actors or even Joe Blogs like me can move laterally into these different systems. Now, hopefully these keys have been rotated since the breach, so I wouldn't grant me access right now, but certainly could have granted a malicious actor access to these internal repositories at the time of the breach. So are there interesting ways of which you can get deeper into perhaps the Samsung infrastructure using the keys that have been found by the initial breach? Now, we have lots of keys like this that we can go through that provide maybe bypasses for a recapture. They could provide inner workings into the systems. They could allow attackers to get deeper into internal messaging systems, such as with the Slack webhooks, which are high value targets because you can launch internal phishing campaigns, which look very legitimate to the employees. Now in here, we also found credentials that are probably unlikely to be related to Samsung, but still could be interesting to an attacker. For example, we found some Dropbox keys. Now, I think it would be unlikely that Samsung would be using a commercial Dropbox solution in their code. Perhaps they could be. But in this file, we can clearly see that there are some Dropbox consumer keys and secret keys in here. Now, why this is significant is that perhaps if this employee is copying sensitive information onto the Samsung server, then perhaps access to their Dropbox might be interesting. Perhaps they've copied over sensitive information or sensitive files that could grant additional access into this Samsung's infrastructure on their personal Dropbox, which we now could gain access to. So you can see there's a lot of different ways in which attackers can use these keys. So let's talk about the problem as a whole now. So why are all these keys littered in this source code? Is that a problem if your source code isn't leaked, and what can you do about it? So this is really a huge problem because source code is a very leaky asset. Even Samsung, which is source code will be more sensitive than most, unfortunately did fall victim to that source code being leaked out into the public. And that's because source code is used by multiple different parties. Different developers have access to it. And when you're dealing with thousands of employees, you just need one to have bad password hygiene or to be working as an insider to grant access to that source code. In fact, Lapsus has even sent out a recruitment inside their Telegram channel looking for insiders, looking for inside employees at a following list of companies. Now this is crazy because so many developers will have access to internal source code for companies. Now that in itself may not be a huge problem, but if that source code contains secrets, such as Samsung, such as Twitch, such as NVIDIA, then those secrets will leak out with those source codes. And even if that employee was never meant to have access to such critical infrastructure and data, the fact that they have access to the source code creates a significant problem. Now, Lapsus sending out this kind of tweet actually gives us an insight into potential attack paths that these hacking groups are using. They're looking for insiders, they're looking for employees that have access to the source code, that have access to internal systems, to kind of come on side with them. Now, while I think that 99% of employees would never do this, Well, you never know who's having a bad day that day, who was just berated in front of their colleagues and maybe willing to change sides to the attackers. So this is why it's so critical that we must make sure our source code doesn't contain any sensitive information. We have to make sure that it doesn't contain these secrets which are going to allow attackers to persist into different infrastructure, move laterally, elevate privileges, or God forbid, be able to sign malicious software as authentic. Now, one of the best ways to do this is through scanning for these secrets. We were able to identify these secrets, the bad guys probably are, but also organizations can. Automated secret detection is critical to set up. And as developers, you can also put in place tools like Git hooks to detect secrets before they enter your repository. Now, not that I want to finish on a grim note, but I don't think we're at the end of seeing these types of attacks. In fact, Lapsus himself has put out a poll asking their followers whose information do they want to see next. And I know Vodafone, one of the options, one of the companies, is currently doing an investigation to find out perhaps have they been breached and what sensitive information could be part of that. Finally, if you're an organization and you're worried that your source code contains sensitive information, then you can reach out to the team at GitGuardian and they can do a scan of your entire source code history to make sure that you don't leave any nasty surprises for attackers if your source code does leak out. So, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm Mackenzie, and remember, secure code is good code.